Fall is in the air, and many people are reaching for recipes that include a can of pumpkin.
But as the experts at Consumer Reports reveal, you may not actually know what's in that can.
Your grocery list is a lie. The items you plan to grab this week, the ones you have been buying for years without a second thought, are being quietly pulled off shelves before summer hits. And Walmart is not sending out a warning. No announcement, no sign on the aisle, just empty space where your staples used to be. In this video, we are counting down 15 canned foods disappearing from stores before July 1st. Stay with me, because number 1 will shock you. Number 15, canned peaches. Let us kick things off with a fruit you probably have sitting in your pantry right now. Canned peaches, sweet, reliable, always there. Except they are not going to be for much longer. The California clingstone peach industry, which is the backbone of canned peach production in this country, is collapsing. Major grower contracts have been canceled. Processing facilities are shutting down instead of upgrading. Canneries are walking away from the peach business entirely. Here is the part that stings. It is not that the peaches are gone. It is that the infrastructure to turn them into something shelf-stable is disappearing. Clingstone peaches. The variety used almost exclusively in commercial canning must be processed within hours of picking. They bruise fast, oxidize fast, and cannot be held in raw form, while a cannery waits for equipment or labor to catch up. When a processing facility goes dark, the growers who supplied it have no fallback. The fruit rots in the orchard, or gets sold at a loss to fresh market buyers who cannot absorb the volume. The whole system collapses from the inside out. Once the current warehouse inventory runs out, those familiar cans of peach halves and light syrup are going to be very hard to find. Start rotating in canned mandarin oranges and pineapple slices. Their supply chains are holding up better, but peaches are just the beginning. Number 14 is a protein staple millions of shoppers depend on, and it is being gutted by a beef crisis you probably never saw coming. Number 14, canned corned beef. If you have ever stacked canned corned beef in your pantry as emergency protein, you are not alone. It is heavy, filling, and it keeps forever. So why is it disappearing? Simple math. The beef cattle herd in this country has shrunk to some of the lowest levels in decades. The National Cow-Calf Inventory, which is the foundational breeding stock that determines how many beef animals enter the supply chain in coming years, has been in contraction for multiple years running. You cannot rebuild a herd quickly. It takes years to grow calves to market weight, and it takes even longer to restore the breeding population that produces those calves. The decisions farmers made 2 and 3 years ago to liquidate herds under feed cost pressure are now showing up as reduced supply at the packing plant level. Canned corned beef is made from utility-grade beef, the affordable stuff that keeps the price manageable at checkout. When that cheap beef dries up, the math stops working. It costs more to fill the can than people will pay. Meat packers are shutting down canning lines because they simply cannot absorb the loss. This is not a short-cycle problem. Rebuilding herd inventory to the point where utility-grade beef becomes affordable again is a 3 to 5 year trajectory at minimum. Canned corned beef is not coming back at its old price point within any time frame most households plan around. Diversify into canned chicken and canned pork now. They are facing far less pressure and will fill the protein gap in your pantry. If this kind of insight, look at what is really happening to the food supply is useful to you, hit the like button right now and subscribe to this channel. This is exactly what this channel is built for, getting you the information before the shelf goes empty, rather than after. Sit tight, because the next one has nothing to do with farms or cattle ranches. It is coming from the open ocean, and the culprit is something most people would never expect. Number 13, canned mackerel. Canned mackerel is one of the best-kept secrets in budget grocery shopping. High protein, loaded with omega fats, and cheap enough to stock by the case. But that affordability is about to evaporate. The problem is not the fish. There are plenty of mackerel in the ocean. The problem is transit. Global shipping corridors are backed up by weeks right now, and mackerel is sensitive. When it sits inside a non-refrigerated container baking in the sun for an extra 2 or 3 weeks, the flavor degrades. Border inspectors reject the shipments. The cans never make it to your store. What makes mackerel particularly vulnerable is where it is processed. The majority of commercially canned mackerel destined for the US market is processed in Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe, regions where port congestion and vessel scheduling delays have stacked on top of each other. A product that already travels a long supply chain is now traveling a longer, slower, and more uncertain one. The degradation window is being hit more often, and the rejection rate at US Customs inspection has climbed accordingly. Discount chains are already seeing the gaps. The mackerel shelf is thinning fast. Stock sardines as your backup marine protein for now. But speaking of disappearing staples, number 12 is a vegetable you probably cook with every single week, and it is caught in a storm of flooding, fertilizer shortages, and rising packaging costs all at once. Number 12. Canned green beans. You might not think of canned green beans as something that could vanish. They are so basic, so everywhere. That is exactly why this one hurts. Commercial canneries need massive, efficient harvest to keep green beans affordable. Erratic weather patterns across the primary growing zones have flooded fields and rotted seed pods before they can even be picked. On top of that, aluminum and steel packaging costs are climbing, squeezing margins from the other direction. The fertilizer piece of this story is not getting enough attention. Green bean yield depends heavily on nitrogen-based fertilizer applied at the right growth stage. Global fertilizer prices remain elevated above their pre-2020 baseline, driven by energy cost increases in Europe and export restrictions from major producing countries. A cannery, buying green beans from contract farmers who are themselves squeezed on input costs, ends up absorbing a margin problem that starts in a Russian potash mine and ends on your grocery shelf. Every link in that chain is stressed simultaneously. When a product stops making financial sense, big food companies idle the processing plant and shift resources to higher margin vegetables. Green beans get cut. The consumer loses. If you have a garden or access to a farmer's market this summer, now is the perfect time to start. Pressure canning at home, you lock in your own supply and skip the retail shortage entirely. We are moving away from the vegetable aisle now. Number 11 involves a tropical ingredient that is getting trapped at sea before it ever reaches your kitchen. Number 11. Canned coconut milk. Here is something most people never think about. You cannot have canned coconut milk without the can. And right now the cans are the problem processing hubs. Throughout Southeast Asia are dealing with a structural shortage of steel shipping containers. The physical boxes needed to move inventory are not available in enough ports. So even when the coconut milk is ready, it cannot ship. And when shipments do make it onto a vessel, extended transit times and extreme heat cause the natural emulsions inside the can to separate. The coconut fat splits from the water, the product curdles, and gets rejected at the border. There is a secondary layer to this problem that most consumers never see. Coconut milk relies on co-processing facilities that also handle palm oil and other tropical fat-based products. When those facilities face raw material shortages or labor disruptions, coconut milk production gets deprioritized in favor of palm oil derivatives, which have longer-term government contracts tied to biofuel mandates. The coconut milk line sits idle, not because there are no coconuts, but because the facility's capacity has been redirected to a higher priority product entirely. Exporters are canceling shipments rather than risk losing entire loads. The result is a thinning supply of canned coconut milk across grocery chains nationwide. Swap in high-quality coconut milk powder packed in Mylar bags. It is shelf-stable for years and does not depend on ocean freight. While coconut milk is stuck at sea, number 10 is disappearing because of what is happening in the orchards of the Pacific Northwest, and this one is hitting families hard around the holidays. Number 10. Canned pears. You would think a pear, something that grows right here in America, would be immune to the global supply chain mess. You would be wrong. Canning-grade pears need to hit a very specific texture to survive the sterilization process inside the can. Too soft, and they turn to mush. Too firm, and they cannot be processed. The window is narrow. Late spring frosts and soil depletion across the Pacific Northwest have knocked the harvest off course. The fruit is either damaged or not maturing properly. The soil depletion piece is a slow-moving crisis that does not make headlines. Decades of intensive monoculture farming without adequate soil restoration have left orchard floors with reduced water retention and mineral content. The trees are producing fruit that looks correct on the outside, but lacks the structural integrity to survive the thermal processing inside a commercial canning line. Brands are rejecting their own contracted tonnage because it fails the texture specification. Major processing brands are running canning lines at reduced capacity because the cost of healthy fruit has climbed past sustainable margins. Distributors are already pulling canned pears from their active summer product lists. Rotate in canned pineapple slices as your fruit backup. The supply chain is more stable, and the shelf life is comparable. Now we are heading to number 9, a holiday staple that got hit from 2 directions at once: climate and labor. And the damage is worse than anyone is publicly reporting. Number 9, canned sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes seem like they should be untouchable. They grow underground, store well, and have been a pantry staple for generations. But here is what most people do not know. Sweet potatoes are picky about their growing conditions. They need well-draining sandy loam soil to mature without rotting. Unpredictable precipitation waterlogged the major growing regions right during the planting window this past season. Then came the labor problem. Sweet potatoes cannot be fully harvested by heavy machinery without bruising the skin. They need careful handling at exactly the right moment. Farmers faced a labor deficit at the exact moment the fields needed to be picked. Millions of pounds rotted in muddy fields. Commercial canners received a fraction of their required raw tonnage and are now rationing what little they have until autumn. The canners that are still operating have shifted to smaller can formats, reducing the unit size from the standard 29-ounce can to 15-ounce cans as a way of stretching limited inventory further. You are paying the same price for less product, and that format change is how the shortage is being hidden in plain sight on the retail shelf. Swap in canned pumpkin as your starchy carbohydrate substitute. But wait, canned pumpkin is also on this list. We will get there. First, number 8 is a protein powerhouse facing a dual crisis that most people have never even heard about. Number 8, canned tuna in olive oil. This is a 2-ingredient crisis, and both ingredients are failing at the same time. Droughts across Spain and Italy have absolutely devastated the olive harvest. Wholesale olive oil prices have hit record highs. Canneries cannot afford to pack tuna in premium olive oil without pushing the retail price so high that sales collapse. The tuna side of the equation has its own complications. Skipjack and albacore tuna, the species most commonly used in canned production, are caught under international fishing agreements that set annual catch limits. Several of those agreements have reduced their allocation numbers in response to stock sustainability concerns in the Central and Western Pacific. Less catch allocation means less raw tonnage available to canneries, which means less finished product on shelves, even before the olive oil cost issue enters the picture. When you combine a constrained fish supply with an unaffordable packing medium, the product simply cannot be produced at a price consumers will accept. So major food brands are halting olive oil-packed tuna lines entirely, replacing them with cheaper water-packed or soybean oil blends. The classic olive oil version is being quietly phased out. Your best move is to buy plain canned tuna and store your own olive oil separately in dark glass bottles. You control the quality and bypass the supply crunch entirely. Real quick, if this video is opening your eyes to what is really happening in the food supply chain right now, do not keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe so you never miss a breakdown like this. Now let us get to number 7. Number 7. Canned chickpeas. Canned chickpeas are the workhorse of plant-based protein. Affordable, versatile, and usually stacked high on every grocery shelf. Not for much longer. India and Turkey are 2 of the biggest chickpea exporting nations in the world. Unseasonal rainstorms hit their growing zones right during the pod drying phase, the critical window when chickpeas need dry conditions to mature. The moisture caused mold to develop while the pods were still on the plant. On top of that, Domestic processing plants are running low on food-grade acids used to soften tough hulls during manufacturing. Without those chemicals, the processing line slows or stops entirely. The food-grade acid shortage is a downstream consequence of disruptions in the industrial chemical supply chain that started during the pandemic and has never fully resolved. These are not specialty chemicals. They are horses of food manufacturing used across dozens of categories. When they become scarce, processors triage. Low-margin chickpeas lose out to higher-margin products every single time. Major canning corporations are suspending standalone chickpea cans and prioritizing mixed bean products instead. Shift your legume stockpile toward black beans, for now. They are facing far less disruption and cover the same nutritional ground. But here's where it gets really interesting. Number 6 is something millions of families bake with every single fall and winter. And its disappearance comes down to one state, one crop, and one very bad stretch of weather. Number 6. Canned pumpkin puree. Most people grab canned pumpkin off the shelf in October and assume it grows everywhere. Here is the truth. The vast majority of canning pumpkins in the United States are grown in one state, Illinois. Not spread across the country, not distributed across multiple regions. One state. That means one bad weather event can wipe out the entire year's supply. Heavy rains delayed the Illinois planting season, pushing the harvest straight into the early frost window. When frost hits a pumpkin rind before maturity, the flesh cannot be processed into thick, shelf-stable puree. It liquefies inside the can. That concentration of supply in a single geographic region is not an accident. It developed over decades because Illinois soil and climate conditions were so consistently ideal for canning pumpkin varieties that the processing infrastructure built itself around that geography. The downside of that efficiency is total vulnerability to a single regional weather event. There is no backup growing zone standing by. When Illinois has a bad season, the entire country has a bad season. Major brands are canceling their production runs. Canned pumpkin will be extremely scarce until next year's harvest. Learn to roast and puree whole winter squash at home. It takes more effort, but gives you full control over your own supply. Number 5 is a comfort food classic that has sat on grocery shelves your entire life, and it is being killed by a corporate decision that has nothing to do with weather or crop failures at all. Number 5. Canned beef stew. Canned beef stew. High calorie? No refrigeration needed? Ready in minutes. It feels permanent? It is not. Canned beef stew needs 2 inputs: utility-grade beef and root vegetables. The domestic beef herd has shrunk and raw input costs are climbing. When supply gets tight, large food conglomerates redirect their limited beef into frozen meal portfolios, which carry far higher profit margins. Canned stew is low margin. When the math gets tight, it gets cut first. The root vegetable component adds a second layer of pressure. Potatoes, carrots, and celery, the classic stew vegetables, are all facing input cost increases tied to fuel, fertilizer, and labor. A canned stew recipe that worked financially at 2020 input prices does not work at 2026 input prices without a retail price increase that pushes the product out of its competitive price band. Rather than reprice the can and lose market share to frozen alternatives, brands are choosing to exit the category. Production has already been slashed across major brands. Once current retail stock sells through, there is no pipeline behind it to refill the shelf. Home, canning ground turkey with root vegetables in a pressure canner is your best long-term answer here. You control the supply. Number 4. Hits premium seafood shoppers who thought they were fully protected from everything on this list. Spoiler, they were not. Number 4. Canned salmon wild-caught. Canned salmon sits in a premium category. People assume that because it costs more, it is insulated from the disruptions hitting cheaper products. That assumption is expensive. Commercial fishing agreements in the Northern Pacific are collapsing. Ocean temperatures are shifting the migratory patterns of salmon runs, pushing the fish out of traditional harvesting zones. Commercial fleets are going out and returning with empty holds. The raw tonnage canneries need to keep their lines running simply does not exist this season. What is catching almost no attention in mainstream coverage is that several Alaskan salmon processors have begun sourcing farmed Atlantic salmon from overseas operations to supplement their canned lines without clearly labeling the product shift. The wild-caught designation that consumers pay a premium for is becoming harder to verify as sourcing gets murkier under supply pressure. If you are buying canned salmon specifically for the wild-caught nutritional profile, that distinction is becoming increasingly unreliable without direct sourcing verification. Massive shipments are being delayed. High-end seafood sections are going empty and staying that way. Shift your marine protein storage to canned sardines. They are more resilient to these disruptions and pack incredible nutritional value per dollar spent. But hold on. Sardines are also on this list. First, number 3, is a stone fruit most people barely think about. But its disappearance is a warning signal for the entire canned fruit category. Number 3, canned apricots. Canned apricots might not top your grocery list, but their disappearance tells you a lot about how fragile the entire canned fruit industry has become. Apricot trees blossom earlier than almost any other stone fruit, making them uniquely vulnerable to late spring freezes. Sustained cold snaps hit the primary orchards right during the blossom window before the flowers could even be pollinated. No pollination means no fruit. The geographic concentration problem compounds this. Most commercially canned apricots in the US come from California's San Joaquin Valley and from imported Turkish and Spanish sources. The California orchards and the European sources were hit by weather disruptions in the same season, removing the geographic redundancy that would normally cushion a regional crop failure. Both supply streams failed simultaneously, leaving canners with no fallback source at any price point. When industrial canners try to work with the limited fruit that did survive, the wholesale costs are so high that packing it at a consumer-friendly price becomes mathematically impossible. Brands cancel the processing run entirely rather than sell at a loss. Canned mandarin oranges are your smarter substitute right now. They handle different climate pressures and have a more distributed global supply chain. Now this next one is going to surprise a lot of people. We told you to stockpile sardines as your backup protein. But sardines are facing a crisis of their own, and the cause has absolutely nothing to do with the ocean. Number 2, canned sardines. Here is the twist nobody saw coming. All the advice to stockpile sardines as your backup protein. It is still valid, but you need to move fast because sardines are facing their own supply crunch, and the cause is completely different from everything else on this list. It is not fish populations, it is not weather, it is the can. An export tariff on tinplate steel and aluminum packaging materials has sent the cost of sardine tins through the roof. Sardines are packed in small specialized metal tins that require precise manufacturing tolerances. When the cost of those tins skyrockets, international canneries shift their limited packaging allocation to high-value products like premium tuna, where the margins are better. Low-margin sardine production gets cut entirely. The manufacturing concentration of sardine tin production makes this worse than it sounds. The specialty tooling required to produce the pull-tab sardine tin format is produced by a small number of industrial manufacturers, primarily in Europe and East Asia. When tariff pressure raises raw material costs, those manufacturers slow production of the low-margin tin formats first. Sardine cans are at the bottom of the profitability ladder. They get cut before anything else. And restoring that production capacity once it goes offline takes months of retooling and contract renegotiation. The domestic import of canning-grade sardines has dropped to historic lows. Your most bulletproof move right now is dried beans packed in airtight buckets with oxygen absorbers. They outlast canned goods by years and are completely immune to packaging cost swings. We are about to hit number 1. And this one is not about weather, shipping, or crop failures. This is about something far more deliberate than anything else on this list. Stay with me. Number 1. Canned pinto beans. This is the big one. And once you understand what is driving it, you are going to look at your grocery store very differently. Canned pinto beans are the foundation of emergency food storage. They show up in chili, soups, stews, and survival food caches everywhere. Affordable, calorie-dense, and shelf-stable for years. which is exactly why they are being bought up before they ever reach your local store. Here is what is happening. Federal agencies and large relief organizations are securing contracts to replenish national strategic food reserves, and they are going directly to the canneries, purchasing entire warehouse inventories at institutional volume before those products ever enter the retail distribution system. Commercial canneries are choosing these government contracts over grocery store allocations because the volume is enormous and the margins are better. The retail pipeline to your local supermarket is being bypassed entirely. The dynamic at work here is not new, but the scale of it is. Institutional pre-purchasing of shelf-stable staples at the cannery level has happened in previous crisis periods. What is different now is the sustained, multi-quarter nature of the procurement cycle. This is not a one-time emergency purchase. It is a rolling, institutional buying program that continuously intercepts supply before it can enter retail channels. The consumer never sees it happen. The shelf just keeps getting thinner. You are going to walk into the bean aisle and find it wiped out. And when it is gone, the boutique brands that remain will charge premium prices because they can, and because you will have no other option. So, here is your actual action plan. Source dry pinto beans directly from local agricultural suppliers. Buy in 50-pound sacks. Invest in a pressure canner and process your own beans at home. You build your own supply, you control your own shelf, and you cut out every layer of the corporate distribution system that is currently failing you. The modern grocery store is built on your passive compliance. It assumes you will keep showing up, keep trusting the shelves, and keep ignoring the logistical decay happening right underneath the surface. Every item on this countdown is a signal that the system is more fragile than you think. Building your own decentralized pantry is not extreme. It is the smartest thing you can do right now. Hey, thanks for watching. If you found these helpful, let us know in the comments. Want to see the exact 10 long-term survival foods that will actually last for 30 years inside your basement without losing a single vitamin? Click on the left. And if you do not want to miss more tips and secrets, hit that subscribe button.